Welcome to Inside the Hive on the Charlotte Hornets on SI podcast. Joining us, he does every week, Sam Dracula. Sam, how are you doing, my friend?
I am doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm doing especially great because I'm looking forward to this week's episode. This was a fun one.
Yeah.
I messaged you with this idea last week, and I was like halfway through the decade, we're gonna do what are the biggest sliding doors moments of the last 5 years, of the last half decade. If we go back, if things went differently, if things broke another way that they were close to doing, or it could have easily gone the other way, what would the butterfly effect be? So that's going to be the main focus of today's podcast. We've got various sections which we'll run through later, but before we get into that, we got to talk about some pretty big news. And like some people wanted to play this down as not big news. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal at all. I'm saying this is big news. LaMelo Ball shut down for the season, is having multiple surgeries, surgery on both his ankle and his wrist, described as small procedures with short turnaround time by Charles Lee. Yes, look, this is an element of, hey, let's shut it down now. No need to win any more games. But when you saw the news, I guess, did it make you feel better or worse about LaMelo Ball? Because I can understand arguments for both ways.
So I expect once the Hornets were fully eliminated, I expected this type of thing. Not the surgery part, just the shutdown part.
Yeah.
And so that piece, shut down, games are meaningless, that no issue with, all for that. But the added parts of surgeries required now, that is a big deal. I don't care how short the turnaround time is. Anytime you get surgery, it matters. Yeah. And especially for repeated issues on two key areas, ankles and wrists, right? So it's like it's concerning. It's concerning.
And the other side of it, I would guess, I could see people arguing is, hey, look, this is why LaMelo's not been playing well. All right, since the turn of the year, he's been battling through these injuries, with his wrist injury, his ankle injury. He's been gutting through these games. It's incredible he's even been playing, and he's going to get surgery now, and he'll play just like he did at the start of last season. So that's like the glass half full side. Mm-hmm. And look, that could be true. I can't sit here and say that's not true. But it's also dangerous for like us to probably presume that is the case, because, you start tricking yourself into like making excuses just all the time. The only people who probably will know are probably the people in and around the team. Like, they will know how much has this been affecting LaMelo Ball. Like, his subpar 3-point shooting, is this because he's been dealing with a wrist he's having to get rehab on, ice every off day and stuff like that? Or really is this to kind of like clean up something very, very minor, which he's been probably had since his rookie year when he broke his wrist? We've all seen him flexing it, right? Doing this whole thing for the last 3.5 seasons. So is this just really minor, and it's essentially, hey, let's just clean it up? I would say if it was really minor, I don't know why haven't they cleaned it up in the past? Because this wrist thing has been clearly, I'm not saying affecting, but bothering him to at least some extent in terms of stiffness since he came back from that broken wrist. And he's had multiple surgeries before where they could have probably done a similar thing. So I don't know now. Are they just at the point where it's like, hey, we've tried the rest and rehab thing for 3 years. It's not made any progress. We're going to try something different because we've got different medical staff involved. Or has it got worse, right? Was it okay before it was just stiff, but now it's like really bothering him and affecting his shooting, whereas before it was just stiff and it would loosen up? And again, we don't know, but these are all kind of the questions that I guarantee the Hornets medical staff and front office will have been having.
Yeah, and I think as Hornets fans, is this something that we just have to accept with the LaMelo package? Like, all the good that comes with it comes this other stuff, this constant maintenance where he has to get some type of procedure every year, every other year, right? And what does that look like for him long term, and if like, affecting his on the court like ability? Because to your point about him coming back and or playing through an injury, like his rookie year, he got hurt, came back, he wasn't the same guy. He was clearly there because the Hornets were in the mix, and he wanted to secure Rookie of the Year. And I want to give him all the credit in the world for like gutting that out and showing up, especially when he had guys on the roster who weren't showing up when they were hurt and playing through injuries. So credit is deserved there. But yeah, it is worrying, and I can't help but think about Brandon Miller during these trying times because he has a very significant shooting hand injury. And what does that look like as far as maintenance going forward? What does the Brandon Miller maintenance package look like going forward? And when you got two of those guys on your roster and they're your two best players, it's a bad combo. You don't want to be in that spot.
And I said to you just the other week, I don't think there's any active NBA player who's had Brandon Miller's wrist injury in his shooting wrist and come back. Like not that they've had it and not come back, I should say. There's just no NBA player that's had it. Some players have had the injury in their non-shooting wrist, so Bradley Beal, Jaylen Brown, but no one's ever had it in their shooting wrist, which like that I can find at least, right? If someone else out there can find an example, great. I've looked pretty extensively. I could not find a single other example, and that is concerning. And you talk about like these ongoing maintenance surgeries. You know what that sounds a bit like? Another former Charlotte Hornets point guard, Kemba Walker, right? Kemba had surgery. It was kind of underrated because he never missed time in season, very rarely. But every season it would be like, oh, Kemba's had another, knee scope just to clear out some loose cartilage. He's had another just to clip off a bit of meniscus, and he never missed any training camp. He never missed any games. So you never really felt it, but like everyone saw how quickly his career fell off after Boston. He was out the league so quickly, and it was because of his knee, because he couldn't play. So these maintenance things, like LaMelo's missing time, Kemba didn't even miss any time, but they still take an effect. Like you don't get surgery just for fun, for no reason. Like some people seem to be claiming out here, oh, he didn't even need surgery. He just got it because, they're just trying to tank and you might as well. It's like, this is not like going to the dentist. This is major thing. So look, good news that he's not going to miss much of the offseason.
Yeah.
Potentially positive news. It could address some long-term issues, both with the ankle and wrist. I mean, I posted actually, I think earlier in the day before I got announced of the surgery that LaMelo dunks have like drastically declined since his 2 years in the league. And the reason I actually looked into this, Sows, and I was watching the LaMelo Ball documentary that's just come out on YouTube. I think it's the Life of a Prodigy called LaMelo Ball. I was on it if people haven't seen it. And even if don't watch it for me, it's just a really good documentary. Going back to the dawn of LaMelo Ball kind of as a teenager, following his journey to the modern day. There were some other really interesting guys on there. Jacob Rude, who's been on this podcast before as a guest. So this is a side note, but if you want 50 odd minutes, go watch the LaMelo Ball documentary, because there's some stuff in there that I'd forgotten about, that I didn't realize. And it also kind of gave you a fresh pair of eyes when you watch LaMelo Ball. And it's like, God, this guy really is exciting. And we shouldn't lose sight of that, even though there are clear drawbacks. But during that documentary, I saw some pretty explosive dunks. And I was like, wow, LaMelo never ducks like that anymore. And I think I went and looked up, and during his first 2 years in the league, first 126 games, had 32 dunks. His last 105 games had 7. Now, I understand people saying, hey, he's not trying to dunk the ball as much anymore. He's not bothered about dunking. He just wants to, focus on laying the ball up. But I get that to an extent. That is a massive drop-off, though. And there is putbacks in there. You rarely see those anymore. I do think we have seen some of the limited athleticism he had because he was never a dunker, right? But I think he had more bounce, and he's lost that quicker for someone who's still 22 years old, 23 years old. I definitely noticed watching the film from him in Australia to now, he looks different in terms of his athleticism.
That's interesting. As you say that, I'm trying to picture LaMelo dunking, and I think we had one a couple nights ago before he got hurt, before he got shut down.
Yeah.
And it did strike a part of your brain. I haven't seen a lot of this lately.
And that was open court, right? Open out, run out, and it was easy two-handed. He used to have some in the half court, right? Or and those are the ones where you really need to have explosiveness, because anyone at 6'7" with, who's in the NBA can run up and dunk the ball, unless you're Caleb Houston for the Magic, who I think has the longest running streak. He's yet to dunk a ball in the NBA. He's 6'8", and I want to say he's been in the NBA now for about 4 or 5 years, maybe 3 or 4 years. It's the longest running streak of a player over 6'6" who's not dunked the ball. So unless you're Caleb Houston, he should be dunking it every now and then.
Mm-hmm. No doubt.
Okay. Anything else on LaMelo?
Get well soon. Get well soon. So he's gonna close out the 5th year of his NBA career on 47 games played, like well above 22 from the last year, and then 36 the year before that. It is the positive step. Hopefully next year we can aim for 50 games and hope for the best at that point. But LaMelo's a really fun player to watch, a really important player to this team, and his availability is always going to be a concern, no matter what. And hopefully this is the end of it. And I'm really hopeful this is the end of it. But I don't think it's realistic to expect that.
No, I don't think so either, right? At this point in your career, it's very rare for a player to do what Steph Curry would do. It's like, yep, just leave past the chronic ankle injuries behind me and not really factor ever again. That's just very, very rare. And look, we've seen from LaMelo's family, they are a family who've struggled with injuries. Jello struggled with injuries, being in the G League. Lonzo struggled with it. And that does matter when you're talking about bloodline, family genes, just not guys who struggle to stay healthy.
Yep.
All right. Let's move on to our main section today. The sliding doors moments from the last 5 years. We're going to provide one from each category. There's going to be the injury category, a draft category, a free agency category, a trade category, and then we've got like a miscellaneous, which is kind of like everything else that doesn't fit into one of those categories. And we're going to go back and forth and share some of our biggest sliding doors moments of, can you imagine what had happened if X, Y, or Z happened? So Sam, I'm going to go to you first, and I'm going to let you pick. You can warm us up, okay? Or you can jump off the top rope. Where are you going to go?
Oh, man. All right. Okay. I'm going to start with the short one. I want to ease into this, I think.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, let's do it. I'm going to start with the trade category. And it's a trade that didn't happen. And the Hornets are worse off for it. All right. I'll just come in with that energy. And by the way, when I was doing this, I didn't want them all to be like under an umbrella of negativity. But it's hard to find the other way with it. So we are here.
Because what's gone well in the last 5 years? It's hard to find ones that lead to great moments.
You can only work with what you got, right? So
yeah, exactly.
So this one is about Malik Monk.
Oh, okay.
So,
I can't remember Malik Monk trade rumors, so I'm interested to see this already.
So Malik's career in Charlotte and with James Borrego has been problematic, to say the least.
And with Steve Clifford as well, with both of them.
Yeah, true. I think Malik started one game as a Hornet in his career in the 4 years. And some of that was self-inflicted, and he's talked about it. He's owned up to it. To his credit, as he's gotten older, he realized that, he wasn't being a professional and he paid the price for it. But that last year, Malik Monk was on one. Like, he was on something special that year. And I think everyone watching could guess that he wasn't going to be on the team the following year. And maybe that's what was driving his play, upping his value, on audition mode, whatever. But it was pretty clear that, and this is LaMelo's first season in the NBA. So we're coming off the LaMelo draft pick. You have Devontae Graham, you have Terry Rozier, and Malik Monk was basically the odd man out in the backcourt, right? It was clear.
But ironically, was also having his best year from memory as well.
Yeah.
I remember Miami game in particular, where I think he had 36 points and he was absolutely on fire against the Heat. And I think that was that year. And he had like a streak of a couple of weeks where he just looked like, like he was taking a leap, right?
Mm-hmm. And, that season, I think he was 40% from three. I have it. I just lost it a second. Yeah. So that season, 42 games played, all off the bench. He was playing about 20 minutes a night, 11 points a night, 40% from three on 2 of 5 shooting nightly, and 47% on twos. he was not much of a playmaker, not much of a defensive guy. But when you're just looking at offensive production and the value of that flamethrower off the bench, Malik Monk was that dude that season. And I know other teams noticed that. Like, they had to have noticed it. And for the Hornets to not capitalize on that is extremely disappointing, because what ended up happening was they just declined to extend a qualifying offer to him. And he walked for nothing. He went to LA, to the Lakers, took the minimum. And the Hornets got nothing. Not even a second rounder from Malik Monk. And I think that is such a missed opportunity to at least recoup something from the Malik Monk time, because they didn't win.
The other sliding doors, what if they re-signed him? So what if they say, we believe in the talent, we think it's going to get there, and look what Malik Monk went on, became sixth man of the year. Now, I will say, and you mentioned it there, what did he do after the season? He signed for the Lakers on the minimum.
Mm-hmm.
If that was his value in free agency, I can't imagine his trade value was great.
But I think it was also him wanting to, he wanted to go there and be a part of the LeBron
I don't know.
experience.
How I remember it in my head was like, he thought he was going to get paid. There was no money out there. And he was like, well, I might as well go to LA and play with LeBron. That's how I remember it. But again, this is so many years ago now, it could be wrong.
So I look at that, and then it's hard not to compare the two, but the Hornets got something for, ended up being really significant, but at the time was not a lot for Devontae Graham. There was a 3-team trade.
More on that later, Sam. More on that later.
Yes. But there was a 3-team trade, and they ended up getting a pick that bumped up to a first-round pick because the Pelicans made the playoffs, I think, right? They won the play-in game.
There. That's one of mine for later. Yeah.
Okay, fair. So,
put on toes here, man. Jesus.
Sorry. I'll keep it focused on Mr. Monk. But yeah, losing him, and looking at this, it had me wondering which former Hornet has had the best career post Charlotte, and it's him and PJ during this run, right? Of within the last 5 years.
Definitely not Terry Rozier. Definitely not Gordon Hayward. He retired.
Definitely not Toaster. Harrell's not in the NBA anymore. Plumlee, he's getting minutes. So
you're right.
Batum?
Malik Monk's the right answer. Sixth man of the year, was legit piece on a playoff team in the West. This is a really good point. He exploded. I don't know if it would have happened in Charlotte. I think it probably would have in some form. I think it would have got closer to where it is, but maybe not quite happen the same way.
Yeah, because even they got Borrego leaves and then Clifford comes back, and then do you do that again? So it's
Malik Monk's oh, thank God that Borrego guy's out of town. Who they bringing back in?
Yeah, and then if they do keep him, and that would influence future draft selections that might not have gone well, in the shooting guard department, right? So yeah,
so they drafted James Bouknight in 2021, right? Yep. Okay, and this is a nice segue into my one, which is about trade, which is about the 2021 draft. Okay. When after they made the picks, Mitch Kupchak jumped on the media call like they do on draft night, and this is the quote that he gave the media. And this is after the James Bouknight pick. There was as much demand for that pick this year as I've ever seen, but we're very happy that we stayed where we are. Sam, what if they just traded that pick? What if they traded that pick? If they moved back in the draft? What if they'd got future first-round picks? I know for a fact in that draft, they worked out 2 guys twice in that whole draft process. One of them was Kai Jones, who they traded back in for. You know who the other one was?
Who's that?
Jalen Johnson.
Rip.
Yeah, that was both Kai Jones and Jalen Johnson had secret workouts, second workouts with the Hornets in the days leading up to the draft. Now, look, if they'd moved back in the draft as part of a trade out with that James Bouknight pick, they probably would have taken Kai Jones anyway, it seems. But at least then they wouldn't have then traded the future first round pick to get Kai Jones and had that future first owed for years, which is inhibited their flexibility a little bit and an ability to trade other first round picks. We don't know what any of those James Bouknight trades were. I think the Warriors were one of the teams listed to be quite interested. And I think they ended up taking Moses Moody back in like the later lottery. It's like you could have traded back to that pick and something like that. But I mean, like you say, they didn't. If they just traded that pick, you wouldn't have had the James Bouknight bust. You probably wouldn't have traded a future first on that same night. And if you picked pretty much anybody else, they probably would have come out better of that. Have you got the draft list in front of you? Who are the guys who are running after that?
So Josh Primo,
okay,
Chris Duarte, Moses Moody, Corey Kispert, and then Şengün 16, and then Trey Murphy 17.
There you go. Right. So, like, say they move back to late lottery to where Moses Moody pick, they could have taken quite easily. Could have taken like a Şengün or a Trey Murphy.
Trey Mann was there at 18 too.
Yeah. That was absolutely in play. And that is a heck of a sliding doors moment for a trade.
But, you know, do you think the interest was for Bouknight at 11 or somebody else at 11?
I think it was for Bouknight because the night of the draft, James Bouknight was the guy who slid.
Right.
Like he was supposed to be going top 8.
Yep.
And he ended up sliding down to 11. Everyone's going, oh my God, we can't believe. And I think I didn't get this quote, but I remember Kupchak even saying like, we were not expecting to have James Bouknight available there. Mm-hmm. And then he ended up being, and the same thing happened with Malik Monk. Okay. And that's why for a number of years, it got down to the Hornets. Like whoever's dropping, the Hornets just shouldn't take them because like it always seems too good to be true. And then it ends up being like, oh, that's why everyone was passing on him. But yeah, look, and link it back to yours. If they'd kept Malik Monk, right, they probably wouldn't have taken James Bouknight in the first place because they would have had even more two guards, right, with Terry Rozier and Devontae Graham and everything. So yeah, a heck of a sliding doors moment there.
Well, so let's keep it with the draft. I'm gonna keep it with the 21 draft. We didn't talk about this beforehand, so
we did not.
This is working out nicely though. So today, March, you're gonna hear this on the 31st, 25th of 2025. The Hornets have nothing to show from draft night 2021. No one's on the roster anymore. You can include Trey Mann if you want to. That was kind of an accident. But when you talk about like cap structure and timing and staggering rookie contracts and veteran contracts, not capitalizing on those rookie seasons from that class with 4 misses really sets you back and can.
Yeah. Especially when you're a team that says we're building through the draft.
Yes.
You can't miss the draft if you're the team that relies on adding talent through the draft.
Yeah, it's an issue. And Trey Mann
just give people the names of everybody for those 4 players, just for people listening.
So James Bouknight, 11th overall. Kai Jones, 19th overall, trade back in with the Knicks. Then they took Thor, which was part of the Mason Plumlee deal. Yep. Thor was top like 37th in the second round, and then Scotty Lewis was 56th in the second round.
Broke his leg in summer league practice and basically never came back to the NBA.
Horrible timing for him. But yeah, it's pretty brutal because Kai Jones found a home. James Bouknight's trying to make it happen. Thor has a home. I don't know where Scotty Lewis is, but no one's in Charlotte. We know that for sure. So the question is for me is like what they do differently with that 11th pick, and there's quite a few options there. And how it impacts future drafts is interesting to me. So there's for me, there's a Şengün path and a Trey Murphy path. And this is all with the benefit of hindsight, obviously. Right? I'm not going to sit here and say on draft.
Şengün. I sat there screaming for the months leading up to the draft and on draft night. I'd Alperen Şengün 6th ranked overall. And I knew there wasn't even like in consideration for the Hornets that night. Because there was just no links whatsoever. But I had such regret, and I still do to this day.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Because at the time, Nick Richards, who's coming off his rookie year,
Vernon Carey was still on the roster as well.
Yeah, Vernon Carey. At the time. PJ Washington was playing small ball center, and they had just traded for Mason Plumlee.
Yeah,
that's the state of the 5 spot for the Hornets at the time, and then for them to say, we're good. We're good on Şengün. They targeted Kai Jones. They believed in Kai Jones. They went out and got the guy that they believed in. I respect that. I know it didn't work out, but I do respect the aggression to go get a guy they believed in.
There is a theme amongst those guys, though. The 4 guys, right? Kai Jones, JT Thor, Scotty Lewis especially, were all like raw with a lot of length, potential. They were all upside picks. Like if these guys work out, they could be special. And the idea was that you develop them over time and then they turn into something and they get much better value. But none of them developed to the extent that they needed to, at least. And like there was a clear strategy there of like, we're going to go super high upside. We're going to take some swings. And that always sounds great, like in theory. But when you go 0 for 3 on swings, then it's not going to look good in hindsight.
No, not at all. Not at all. So like, let's pretend they select Şengün with the 11th pick in that year, right? The next season, they're staring in real life. They took Mark Williams and Jalen Duren. They're not doing that if they have Şengün. So what are you looking at in that scenario? Assuming the Hornets are still in the same kind of range, right? Just in the middle of the pack, taking out the top level guys, taking out the bottom level guys. You're kind of looking at Tari Eason, Abaji, Christian Brown, like that range. And then so like theoretically your young core going into
Jalen Williams, was he not that year as well? Like he went like Jalen Williams, OKC Jalen Williams.
The better one went earlier, I believe. Yes.
I thought he went 2022 to OKC around late lottery, no?
The good one is from Santa Clara, went 12th.
Yeah.
But like the Hornets were picking 13th, so I don't
13th. Okay, yes,
I didn't have
of course.
Him,
yeah.
Like
sorry. I thought he went okay. I thought he went after our first pick. No, you're right.
So, you're kind of looking at a grouping of LaMelo, Şengün, Eason, Abaji, or Brown, like one of them guys, which will probably take you out of the Brandon Miller mix, right? And then you're looking at that draft of Keontae George, Grady Dick. Like, I don't know where you go in 2023. George is like from that class right now is the third leading scorer in the league from that class. So that's why I have him in the mix, and he was well within that range. He's 16th overall that season or that in that draft class. So today you'd be looking at going into the 2024 draft cycle of your young core being LaMelo Ball, at the LaMelo Ball, Keontae George, Tari Eason, Şengün. And then you do whatever. I don't know where you go with the 24. I don't know what that team looks like, the rest of the team, but that is, for me, a more balanced situation and having something to show from those draft classes with the benefit of hindsight, of course. And then then you go into I think you would still do the Hayward deal, the Rozier deal, the PJ Washington deals, and kind of fortify your situation a little bit, adding draft capital and clearing space. But there's also the Trey Murphy path where you take him, who he went 17th. Then you're in a position to go Trey Murphy in 21 and Walker Kessler in 2022. And then you got like a LaMelo, Murphy, Kessler situation where it's like really heavy on defense.
That
like
would
really
be interesting.
And
I think, yeah, that's interesting.
And that's a grouping I like more, honestly, than the first one.
Well, that's I like Şengün and LaMelo's fit just as like pretty awkward and clunky. That's the trickiest thing. I just don't know how that would have worked out. Let's go to my draft one, and I'm going back a year earlier, the 2020 draft.
All right.
When everyone knows the Charlotte Hornets were picking number 3. There was a clear top 3 in that draft. It was James Wiseman, Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball. And we kind of got the feeling the day before the draft that Anthony Edwards was going to go number 1, but we really didn't know. And there was a lot of talk that the Hornets really liked James Wiseman during that draft. And I have a quote here from the Charlotte Observer. So those sources said they believed the Hornets, who hold the 3rd overall pick, would consider trading up if it would secure Wiseman, who played just 3 college games at Memphis before opting out of his freshman season and turning pro. One of those sources said they view guard Anthony Edwards as the Hornets' backup plan if Wiseman wasn't available to be Charlotte. Just reading that sentence now that James Wiseman is an Anthony Edwards backup plan. No, Anthony Edwards is a backup plan for Wiseman. It's just in 2025. It's just a wild, wild world.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if the Hornets had traded up with the Golden State Warriors to 2, then selected James Wiseman, and LaMelo Ball had gone to Golden State at 3? I mean, the the jokes of the Hornets being terrible in the draft and MJ not being, it would be Kwame Brown all over again. Like, not just drafting Wiseman, trading up to get the guy, and the way that his career has gone. Now, he's had injuries. He has, but even before the injuries, right?
Yeah.
That he was borderline out the NBA, like backup center, and it was always a risk because he'd played 3 games and he was a big high school star. And like, look, he was athletic, he was huge, he could shoot, he had some playmaking, but he suffers from a little Mark Williams-itis of like being really big but not being impactful defensively, and then the offense never came online either. That would have been an unmitigated disaster, and that would have set this franchise back even further if that had happened. And it was, it wasn't that far away from happening.
So
they were looking forward to try and get James Wiseman. It's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Like, now, if they'd have got the first overall pick, they might have taken James Wiseman over Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball.
Yeah. So, but counterpoint, they take Wiseman. It goes terribly. They're at the top of next year's draft, and then you're looking at Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, Evan Mobley. Is doing a deal with James Wiseman worth it for one of those guys for getting Evan Mobley the next year?
They'd still be trying to prioritize James Wiseman's development by like posting him up and like, getting Cade off ball so they can focus on Wiseman. No, it would be a disaster. It would have been a disaster. Okay, let's go free agency next. I'm gonna go with this one. The summer of 2021, after the draft, the Hornets had quite a bit of cap space, and free agents went off the market pretty quickly. And the Hornets were sitting there towards the end of free agency, towards the end of the first week. And they were the only team, I think, who had cap space left. They had about, I want to say like 15, 18 million, something in that range. And I remember exactly where I was when I read this tweet. I was at a caravan in Cornwall, right? Southwest tip of England, the beachy area. And I checked my phone and there was a tweet from Shams saying, the Charlotte Hornets have emerged with strong interest in a potential offer sheet for Chicago restricted free agent Lauri Markkanen. Restricted free agents can begin signing offer sheets on Friday. I'm there like, Lauri Markkanen, really? He's been kind of out of sorts in Chicago. Anyway, within 12 hours, that disappeared. All of a sudden, Kelly Oubre, you're a Charlotte Hornet. And this was one of my biggest misses, actually, in like the whole time I've been analyzing the Charlotte Hornets, is I thought the Kelly Oubre signing not only was a really good signing, like an excellent signing, because I always thought Kelly Oubre ranked well, and I think Kelly had like a good couple of years in Charlotte. But I was running laps saying, wasn't that better than signing Lauri Markkanen? And Markkanen ended up going, I believe, to Cleveland that summer instead, where he really struggled. And at that time, Kelly Oubre's hitting all those threes in those games. Lauri Markkanen struggling. You're going, Hornets, didn't you make such a great decision? Well, Lauri Markkanen gets traded to Utah and ends up becoming an all-star. And now I just think, like, imagine if you added Lauri Markkanen to this team as like an offensive threat floor spacer next to LaMelo Ball. Look, defensively, there would have been question marks, but you're talking about pure talent there. And I think he would have had like enough shots to be able to do what he was doing in Utah and develop the same way in Charlotte. And to go from a below average starter or average starter in Kelly Oubre to a upside all-star in Lauri Markkanen. And it was right there, Sam. Yeah. We were on the 6-yard line, or whatever the phrase is in American football. We were close.
Mm-hmm. That I forgot all about that.
I know. That's why it's so great doing this.
We should have done a trigger warning at the start of this podcast. Like, if you're a Hornets fan, like, please stay focused on the road. I know that was like we all just went on a journey just now to regret and pain. And just even thinking about Kelly Oubre and the roller coaster it was watching him, how he could hit like 5 threes one night and then go for like 0 for 7 or something like the next night. It was insane. Like what Kelly you would get each and every night was a roll of the dice. Like okay, that's a good one. That's a really good one.
Thank you. What is your free agency one?
So Gordon Hayward,
Yep.
you know, I don't,
It was,
I
so
don't,
bad.
I don't know, man. Like
Do you
120
remember how you
million.
felt when you first heard it?
Yeah, I hated it then.
Yeah, me too.
I thought he was a lock to go to Indiana. Like everyone was like Indiana, 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 and then I was getting. My friend texted me when it happened. I was like, no, it's not happening. He's not going to Charlotte. That's stupid. And then I get like I think it was a Woj tweet. I was like, are you kidding me, man? Are you joking? Because the Hornets had just gotten free, right? MKG off the books, Marvin Williams off the books. I think they ended up waiving Batum to make this thing happen too, which is also pretty brutal.
They waived and stretched his final year. So for 3 more years after signing Gordon Hayward, they were paying Nick Batum $8 million per year. And in those 3 years afterwards, he was with the Clippers in the playoffs, playing extremely well, while the Hornets are still paying him $8 million to go away and do nothing, so they could sign the corpse of Gordon Hayward.
It's insane. It's crazy. And that team, that Hornets team, was coming off a 23-win season. Gordon Hayward, like Gordon Hayward, the player, is not the type of player that you put on a 23-win team. He's a guy you add to a decent to good team to make them that little bit better. That he's a connective piece. He's not a franchise lifter, and to commit to that is crazy. Was crazy and is crazy. There's no reason to do that, and it just really shines a light on the, I guess, temperament or patience level from that front office compared to this one, because they really went for it. And I don't know if that was an MJ driven thing or a Kupchak driven thing.
It was an MJ driven thing, because MJ had tried to sign Gordon Hayward years earlier when he was with the Jazz, and he signed him to the contract, and the Jazz matched it, the offer sheet.
Yeah.
And this was MJ wanting to prove everyone that he could still get his guy, that he could bring a free agent to Charlotte. Like, he'd courted Gordon Hayward years ago. Like you say, it was his impatience, him wanting to just fast forward the bloody rebuild, and it absolutely crippled this team. And it went exactly how probably like you and I thought it would go, is where they wouldn't be good enough with Gordon Hayward to really do much. And he's probably going to be injured a lot of his time while he's in Charlotte. And it's exactly what happened. And anyone who said, oh, the argument I remember is, well, you've got a star like LaMelo Ball, you need to have like a veteran presence to surround him with. And I'm like, yeah, I completely understand needing veteran guys, but you just don't go and pay $35 million per year for one of the most injury-prone guys in the league. You can get veteran presence for half that money. That you can trade for a guy to get veteran presence. You don't take up all your flexibility and also push yourself into the no man's land in the NBA world of like playing team, which is exactly where they ended up for no reason.
Yeah, it was a move that was probably 2 years too soon, and it really hampered their ability to build a proper roster in that window where they pushed the button. They traded Kemba, they went in youth, and they were like, you know what, we're going back to the highway now. We're planning to take it slow. No, I don't like this. We're jumping back on the interstate, and it set the whole thing back.
Yeah,
but they got Trey Mann out of it. So, got Micic for a year and a half. Well, maybe not even a year and a half. I think maybe a full year, maybe a full year.
Never traded again. Let's move to injury ones. And look, I'm saying that these probably aren't going to be great either. I do have a positive one later. I just want to say I do have a positive one. LaMelo Ball broke his wrist in his rookie year. Okay. The Hornets finished with a record of 33-39. That was a 10th seed. If they had won just 3 more games, they would have moved up to 7th in the East. And you can't tell me that with a healthy LaMelo Ball who didn't break his wrist, that they wouldn't have won 3 more games over what was like a 5-week period. I just don't believe it. So at that point, not only do they finish 7th, that means they probably make the playoffs, so you don't have the play-in loss to Indiana. Okay, that was embarrassing fashion. Yeah, look, maybe they had struggled, but like LaMelo was playing at that point, like he wasn't fully healthy when we came back, as we discussed earlier. Yeah. I think if they finish 7th, they probably have a pretty good chance to have made the playoffs. And you get that monkey off your back, all right? That, LaMelo Ball can't win, they can't get anything to the playoffs. They also would have gone from 11th in the draft that year, where they drafted James Bouknight that we talked about. And this interjects with another one of your points earlier. They would have moved back to 15th, 16th in that draft, Sam, where our old friend Alprin Şengün, Corey Kispert, and Trey Murphy are seeing again. And again, they probably don't trade that future first for Kai Jones. They might draft Kai Jones there, which would have been less than ideal, but it wouldn't have been as bad as it played out. All because of LaMelo Ball's broken wrist.
That's interesting. That's interesting because that was it. It was the next year where it was the 43 win season, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
With but still finished in the 10th seed, and then they lost to the Hawks in blowout fashion.
Yeah. Yeah. Brago's still probably the coach then as well. If they make the playoffs that year before against Indiana, that's interesting.
What's your injury related one?
Okay, it's a lot. It's everybody, bro. I'm gonna go through it, and the Hornets could have Wemby right now, and so stay with me. All right, we're gonna go on a journey. Coming off of the 21-22 season, that 43 win season, and they got cooked in the play-in, but they still positive momentum, right? 10 win improvement every single year up until that point. They fire Borrego. It happens. We know why they did it. They did it. But that season, they had 6 guys play 70-plus games. Miles Bridges, Kelly Oubre, LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, Mason Plumlee, Cody Martin. PJ played 65 games. Hayward played 49. Side note, that's probably the healthiest the roster's ever been in the last 5 years. But that's not part of this. The next season, they hire Clifford. They win 27 games, 14th in the Eastern Conference, with basically the same team. Now, Miles Bridges didn't play that year. We know why. But he's not like, you know what I mean? Like, his absence isn't that significant. But the injuries were, right? PJ was the only guy to crack 70 games. JT Thor was next at 69 games. Everybody missed time. And for me, as a Hornets fan, it cratered my confidence in this squad, right? Because you had Cody played 7 games, LaMelo played 36. That was Mark Williams' rookie year. That's a bit of a weird one because he's not really part of the injury list because he spent a lot of time in
G League, and then it was thumb injury. It was a combination. Like the first half of the season, he just wasn't in the rotation in the G League. The second half of the season, he started to get in the rotation and he broke his thumb, and then he ended up missing, I think, like the rest of the season.
So Mark's in there on an asterisk, like not really, but he wasn't really part of the situation, right? Oubre played 48, Hayward played 50, his career high as a Hornet. Mason played 56, Rozier played 63, so 65 at a Knick. The point is, it was right there in the front office's face that there's a talent deficiency and an injury issue with this. And that there was a potential of going into another year of what just happened. Like when you see it and nothing changes and expect different results, that's on you, right? And that year is when they blew it up. Is when you saw Hayward and PJ and Terry get traded later that same season. But what if they blew it up in the summer when when they saw what happened and how things fell apart and how guys were falling down and not getting back up and chose to go and tank for Wemby in the summer, not during the year, because they were lucky to jump up to get Brandon. Like they shouldn't. The Hornets were at the fourth best odds, I should say, for the first overall pick that year, I believe, and jumped up. I think maybe Detroit, maybe.
Detroit moved back 3 years in a row, so that would be right. Just assume if you jumped, you've jumped Detroit.
Unlucky, although it's working out for them. I wish I was a Pistons fan right now. They had an opportunity to like really fully go for Wemby that year. And again, you don't know how the lottery balls go, but San Antonio has been prepping for Wemby for years, and it worked out for them. So I think there was an opportunity coming off of that Clifford first season and seeing how things fell apart to just fully embrace the tank and really make a run at the lottery balls for Wemby. And they chose to do it, but it happened too late.
And look, Mitch Kupchak even said after that season, I believe, that he had to take responsibility because this team did not have good enough depth. And that's him basically just taking complete ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's right. It was his fault. They relied on, they had these too many Nick Richards, Vernon Carey Jr., Scotty Lewis, like these guys in the second round, JT Thors, too many of them, like on the roster, on full contracts. And it just, they didn't have enough veteran players. And we also saw the impact of that off the court, right? With like some of the stuff that you heard there. Just too many young guys, not enough professionals. This isn't an official injury one, but if Mason Plumlee had never broken the finger in his right hand, he might still be shooting free throws right-handed, Sam. This is a fun little one. Yeah. He might be still. He never find out that he's a better free throw shooter with his left. Who knew?
In like statistically, he had to be because he was such a bad one with the right. But it was really like a revelation with the left hand. Yeah. And it could be Brandon Miller's future. Like when we don't know. We don't know how this is gonna work out. Oh man.
All right. Those are our main categories. Miscellaneous. I've got two good ones here. I think maybe you said before the show that you didn't have one, but I want to run through my two, and you let me know if you come up with any more. Like you touched on it earlier. When they traded Devontae Graham, they got a lottery protected first round pick from the New Orleans Pelicans. Now the Pels made the play-in, and they beat the Clippers 105-101 to make the playoffs. Brandon Ingram scored 30 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 67% shooting, great game. The Pels gave up a 25-2 run in the first half and came back and won the game on a 24-7 run. I watched the game at 3 a.m. Yeah. Again, this is really weird because this is the same caravan in Cornwall that I got the Kelly Oubre Lauri Markkanen news. I remember exactly where I was. I don't know why this caravan in Cornwall, weird shit happens there. And the family who had it have sold it, so I'm not going back. I'm watching here in the middle of the night, watching Brandon Ingram just lead this like incredible run back, and I'm going, they're not actually going to make the playoffs because if the Pelicans had lost that game, that pick would have turned into 2 second-round picks. Instead, it turns into a first-round pick, not just a first-round pick, the 15th pick. The very best first-round pick it could have been because it was lottery protected. They end up using that trade and trading it for the Pubi Platter trade. This was the trade we didn't like in that 2022 draft. They traded the 13th pick. No, in fact, they ended up keeping that pick, to draft Mark Williams at 15. Then they traded their own pick at 13. And that led to Nick Smith Jr., Amari Bailey, and Bryce McGowens. They traded the 13th pick for Nick Smith Jr. It's not quite as simple as this because they traded it for like a first and some seconds that they then shifted seconds around. But that's essentially the net ranking of what you're left with. It's Nick Smith Jr., Amari Bailey, and Bryce McGowens. Look, 2 of those guys. One's on a 2-way contract to McGowens. Amari Bailey's in the G League. Nick Smith Jr. is like maybe a rotation player on a bad NBA team. And you traded the 13th pick for that. So it was just an inexplicable. If the Clippers had if the Clippers had just won that game, just done business, like that would have been very different. And at the time, you're there sitting there celebrating, thinking they've got a first round pick, and then they just like give it away, turn a dollar into 3/4, and did nothing with it.
Was it a cap thing? Did they not want to add
another
first rounder?
Some people. I think Mitch Kupchak made the point during a media availability is like, oh, if you do keep a lottery pick, they make more money than, another pick. And it was like, well, yeah, like that. We know that's the case. Mitch, thanks for explaining that. And I think some people then took that as when, oh, well, they did it for cap saving reasons. But like they could have found ways. They could have found so many ways if they really wanted to. I think they just didn't want to have too many young players on the roster. That's the thing that I remember being discussed, like, which I understand because they've just come off a year. It's like we need more depth, but like move other young players, move off guys who stink rather than, just giving away the 13th pick and get better value back. Get a future first that isn't, Denver's that's like was 29th overall or whatever it was. It was just such a terrible asset management. They just turned that thing, which was a decently valuable pick, into a bunch of crap.
There's a chance that 2022 draft ages worse than the 21 draft. Like, if Jalen Duren continues an upward trajectory,
yep,
that will add to this thing, because it's that thing where, because the Hornets are already holding that with SGA, so they can add another one to the list where you select a guy and you move him.
I don't think it's going to be SGA level. That's the one thing I'm like, it could be.
You never know.
It shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be.
But if he touches an All-Star game, it hurts. It hurts, right? So yeah, it depends on what happens with Mark Williams going forward as well. Like, that's the other part to it. But yeah, I mean, there's a shot. There's a shot, because was that the McGowan's second rounder?
Was it that year? I don't know off the top of my head. I don't have it in front of me.
No, it was McGowan's. It was McGowan's in the second round. Okay. Yeah.
Because they moved up to get McGowan's from someone else. That they used one of the second round picks from the trade. But yeah, so I actually class this as a good sliding doors. Like, the Pelicans came back from this massive hole to win, to give them the first round pick. Like, what a great sliding doors. Let's not focus on what they ended up doing with that. But that was a really cool sliding doors moment that really easily could have gone the other way.
And that was a lot of fun. Like, that was before I could gamble on things in North Carolina. And so I was watching a Pelicans game for the first time ever with a rooting interest. Yeah. And that was a lot of fun. So I'm grateful for that, for sure.
That was the best playoff moment the Hornets have had in like the last half decade, was the Pelicans beating the Clippers.
Hey, you get what you get. You get what you get.
Look, last one I have, and I'm surprised it's not come up earlier, and we kind of touched that. What if Kenny Atkinson didn't back out the Hornets job?
Yeah, valid.
Yeah,
he's killing it with Cleveland.
Accepted the role, backed out. Rumors around he wasn't able to hire the staff that he wanted to hire budget wise. And again, not a good look for Michael Jordan or Mitch Kupchak. If he just accepted the role, Steve Clifford never would have returned to Charlotte, and he wouldn't be in the front office now, unlikely. I think Kenny Atkinson would probably still be in post, even after the disappointing years of injuries, because Chanel and Peterson are buying the team. And I think he's a guy who goes back with Jeff Peterson during his time at Brooklyn and with Rick Chanel during his time in Atlanta, like a guy who was across both those places. So I think they probably keep him, which means they don't appoint Charles Lee. And then I think that the Cavs wouldn't fire JB Bickerstaff to get Kenny Atkinson, because Kenny Atkinson would be with the Charlotte Hornets. So JB Bickerstaff would still be with the Cleveland Cavaliers, which makes me think that the Pistons probably would have then hired Charles Lee. And Charles Lee would be coaching the Detroit Pistons. This is my tenuous links to a coaching carousel. So yeah, if Kenny Atkinson had just accepted the job, Charles Lee could have been a Piston right now.
Damn. Don't tell Charles Lee that. He's spreading joy across Detroit, man. Damn, that's an interesting one. Because I was wondering about that one too, but
it didn't fit into our categories really. So that's why we had to create the miscellaneous section here, just to shoehorn in a couple of interesting ones.
Yeah, and like, even I was thinking also, just even with the ownership, like if someone else bought the team, maybe the timing of the ownership change, how things would be different. But I don't know. It's too hard to go down into the weeds. And I also don't remember hearing anything about potential buyers. I've heard the rumors about Jordan looking to sell, but not necessarily who would be interested in buying the Hornets leading up to it like that.
No. Sam, that is it. Our half decade sliding doors moments. Yeah, a lot of negative ones. And look, it's not a surprise, right? I guess the other one you could have said is like, what if the Warriors have taken LaMelo Ball at 2 instead of James Wiseman, and then the Hornets
Yeah.
took Wiseman at 3. So yeah, there's a positive one. If we could flip that one around for a minute.
I got another one while we're still here. Like, what if, because the COVID year, right, the shutdown year, the Hornets were a win away from the bubble. So what if they have that win, get that invite? Because was it the Suns who went on that run?
Yes.
In the bubble and built some momentum going into the next season. So there's like that element of like, what if the Hornets made it to the bubble and were able to gel, figure something out, right? Because the ending of the bubble season, the end of the bubble season and the start of the next season wasn't a lot of time, and impacted a lot of, I think, created a lot of issues for that draft cycle and free agency cycle, because you had to get after it because the league wanted to get back on schedule. I think there's an element of that too, of like, what if the Hornets made the bubble and were able to figure some things out in that situation that could be built upon into the next year.
Yeah, it's true. Sam, I think that's everything for us this week. Look, we didn't talk a lot of Hornets games this week. We might touch back on some recent performances recently. Tidjane Salaam with the double-double for the night.
Let's go,
One of our preseason predictions. It's the second time it happened, but still give ourselves a little tick. So, but yeah, we'll be back on chatting some current Hornets stuff, but we want to take a little big picture week out this week. But thanks. That was a lot of fun, Sam. I enjoyed going through that process and reliving some of the past 5 years.
Me too. I'm gonna need a walk after this, but I had a lot of fun.
A drink.
Yeah, a drink sounds better, honestly.
Yeah.
More efficient.
All right, Sam, I will catch you next week.